So on March 23rd, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, they announced it has ended certain flexibilities it first announced back in March of 2020 to address the COVID-19 pandemic. And during the pandemic, an additional 60 days was added to deadlines to respond to almost any notice from immigration. So whenever anyone got a notice from immigration, they said respond in 30 days, 60 days, you got an extra 60 days because of COVID. That included requests for evidence, continuations, notices of intent to deny, notices of intent to revoke, notices of intent to rescind, notice of intent to terminate, notice of intent to withdraw temporary protected status, motions to reopen on citizenship, and all appeals. Whatever the deadline was to respond to an immigration notice or to do an appeal, you got an extra 60 days up until March 23rd of this year. That's when the COVID protocols ended. So any notice that anybody receives now must be responded by the date on that notice. Any notice that's mailed after March 23rd. Any notice mailed before March 23rd, dated before March 23rd, you get the extra 60 days. And most of these notices that I just mentioned, you have a 30-day turnaround. So it's going to be much more difficult to respond to RFEs and notices of intent to deny, etc. The one COVID rule that stayed permanently relates to the reproduced signatures. That's photocopies of signatures or electronic signatures. They're acceptable on all immigration forms. You don't need the wet signature anymore. The wet signature being, your inked pen. So you don't have to have an inked pen signature anymore. And that's also a result of COVID, but they made that permanent. So you don't need to have any of those wet signatures, as they like to call it, on immigration forms. You can use electronic signatures or anything off a computer, or a photocopy of anything off of a computer. Lawful permanent residents can now receive their temporary evidence of their lawful permanent resident status by mail, rather than physically visiting a field office to receive a temporary stamp in their passport. Also known as the ADIT stamp, which is an alien documentation, identification, and telecommunication stamp, also known as the I-551 stamp, also known as the temporary green card stamp. Those who really know it are those people who filed to renew their green cards and needed to travel and didn't have the renewal of their green cards. The other people who know these stamps very well are people who have a conditional green card and their conditional green card expired, and they filed the I-751 to remove the conditions of their permanent residence, and the extension on that notice was already expired, and they don't have a decision on their I-751, and they would have to go down and wait in line all day long to get a temporary stamp in their passport so they can work or they can travel. Well, now, thank God, USCIS has entered, I don't even want to say the 21st century, hopefully the 20th century, because you don't have to go wait online anymore. They're going to do it through the mail. You can call up immigration on their 1-800 number, and if you need a temporary stamp in your passport to travel or to work, because you're renewing your I-90, your green card, because you have a pending citizenship and your green card expired, because you have this I-751 extension going on forever, immigration will take the information over the telephone and then mail you a temporary ADIT stamp, a temporary I-551 stamp that you can use to travel, work, etc., rather than taking the entire day off and waiting online and praying you would get it. Now, some people will still have to go do the wait online thing, and those are people who can't, readily identify themselves, prove their identity. Those where immigration has a question on whether or not you are a green card holder or have a pending citizenship or there's some issue with your case. Those with criminal records may need to go down. And those who need to travel on an emergency basis, because obviously immigration is not going to be able to mail you the extension immediately. But that saves so much time for so many people. So I'm glad, at least in this particular case, the Immigration Service has, come, I don't want to say up to 2023. This is like 1990 technology. Call on the phone and we put it in the mail to you. But it's certainly better than 1950 where they tell you, come wait online. There's no other way to do it. So we're getting closer. U.S. strikes the deal with Canada over their northern border. According to internal documents obtained by the Los Angeles Times and a source familiar with the negotiations, the United States and Canada have struck an agreement that allows each country to turn back asylum seekers who cross the northern border without authorization. And this deal is the latest expansion of President Biden's effort to discourage asylum seekers from entering the United States without prior authorization. The new policy, which applies to people without United States or Canadian citizenship who are caught within 14 days of crossing the border between Canada and the United States, is expected to take effect immediately. And if you are caught within 14 days of crossing the border from Canada to the U.S., you will not be able to seek asylum, and you will be summarily deported back to another country. Now, according to source, the negotiations, which have been going for several years, were completed after recent increases in the number of unauthorized crossings of the border. Both the United States and Canada have struggled to deal with people who entered the country without permission. President Biden and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had a series of meetings in Ottawa on Thursday to discuss key strategic interests, including migration. Really, you think about it. What does this mean? Well, if you get caught within the first 14 days of crossing the border from Canada to the U.S., not going to be able to apply for asylum. So who's this going to reward? It's going to reward people who are really good at hiding. All right. It's going to reward people who smart enough when they cross the border. They don't hang out near the border. They go. If you make it past 14 days and you're running and nobody catches you, then we'll accept your asylum case. So just forces people to break laws more, if anything. The new deal would update the so-called Safe Third Country Agreement between the two countries. That agreement took effect in 2004, as long required migrants who arrive through an official port of entry to seek asylum in a country they passed through first. The old agreement, however, did not apply to people who crossed the northern border without permission. So if you remember, people who go to Mexico, if you touch down in Mexico and then cross into the United States without inspection, now under the new laws, you can't apply for asylum in the U.S. because the only place you could have applied for asylum is Mexico. So coming from the southern border, the only people who could apply for asylum now moving forward who entered the country without inspection are Mexicans, unless you applied for asylum before the law changed. And coming from Canada, if you get caught within 14 days, you can't apply for asylum. But if you're a good hider and you're a really fast runner and you got caught on the 15th day, all right, we'll let you apply. Pretty silly. The administration also plans a new rule to limit asylum across the southern border, which is what we just talked about. And the source explained the new agreement with Canada, along with Ottawa's decision to offer 15,000 new slots for legal entry, is part of the Biden administration's effort to work with other countries to increase consequences for people who cross borders without authorization. The source said the drop in border crossings in February proves that the new approach is already working at the southwest border. U.S. arrests for migrants at the U.S.-Canada border, while rare compared with those at the U.S. border with Mexico, have gone up in the last several months. The 2,856 arrests of migrants at the northern border this fiscal year, which began in October, have already eclipsed the previous year's arrests, and almost 40,000 migrants had entered Canada from northern New York State, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation reported last month. So a lot of people who are living in the United States who probably can't apply for asylum anymore because they're undocumented more than a year are now trying their shot at Canada and trying to cross over illegally into Canada. But if you cross over illegally into Canada and you're caught within the first 14 days going into Canada, you're going to have a problem too. According to authorities, flight records and a Reuters witness, U.S. authorities are flying migrants caught illegally crossing the U.S.-Canada border to Texas, also as part of a deterrence effort to tackle a rise in crossings over the northern border. U.S. Border Patrol has quietly transported about 100 migrants this month on 2 charter flights from Plattsburgh, New York, near the border with Canada, to the Texas cities of Arlington and El Paso. The southbound flights from the northern border are a break from past practices as the United States deals with their sharp rise in migrants crossing illegally from Canada. Gil Kurlkowski, a former commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, said he could not recall the agency using charter flights for migrants caught crossing from Canada in the past. A CBP official told Reuters that 48 migrants, 47 Mexicans, 1 Colombian, were flown from Plattsburgh to Arlington on March 13th to be repatriated back to Mexico, back to Colombia, calling it the consequence of crossing illegally. Customs and Border Patrol did not comment on a second flight from Plattsburgh to El Paso on March 21st. Thomas Cartwright, an advocate with the group Witness at the Border, who tracks U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement charter flights, said given the relatively high cost of the flights, it appears they were intended as a deterrence to send a big message. Brandon Judd, president of the National Border Patrol Council, a union for ICE agents, said he was informed that plans for a third flight next week were now uncertain due to the large costs. Judd said the vast majority of migrants caught at the northern border are released pending an appearance at U.S. Immigration Court. The Guardian has learned that the Biden administration has resumed deportations to Russia, a reversal of the position adopted after Russia invaded Ukraine just over a year ago, when such removals were suspended. It's unclear when deportations to Russia resumed, but it was recently, and the White House did not respond to a request for a comment. Russian asylum seekers, many of whom have made their way to the United States in the last year, are now terrified. The United States government will return them to Russia, where they can face prison or be sent to the front line, where Russia has seen tens of thousands of casualties and deaths in their war with Ukraine. Migrants from Russia came to the U.S. thinking they could seek asylum and be protected from deportation because of the stated government position. Jennifer Scarborough, a Texas-based attorney whose clients include 4 Russian men who entered the U.S. across the border from Mexico and sought asylum, said these men cited fear of being drafted to fight in petitioning for their asylum. So here is the United States of America arming Ukraine with billions and billions of dollars of military equipment to fight back the Russian army. And the reason why the Russian army is so successful is they have so many people to send into Ukraine, wave after wave of people, even though the equipment that Ukraine has is, from all accounts, superior than the Russian equipment. And now people are escaping from Russia, wanting to come to the United States because they don't want to be drafted into the army. So what does the U.S. do? They send them back to go fight Ukraine. The United States is trying to win the war, and we're sending back more soldiers to fight. Crazy, crazy, crazy. If you remember, in January 2023, the Biden administration announced parole programs to provide legal pathways to the 30,000 individuals a month from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela to enter the United States with a U.S. sponsor. According to a National Foundation for American Policy analysis, the number of Border Patrol encounters at the southwest border declined by 98% for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans as a group between December 22 and February 23. 98% ended illegal immigration crossing over from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, ended the deaths, ended the walls, ended the everything, just because they came up with a legal pathway to allow people to come to the United States. Amazing, right? When you do a simple right thing. Border Patrol encounters with Cubans along the southwest border dropped by 99.6% from 42,616 in this period to 176 people. Between December 2022 and February 23, Border Patrol encounters declined by 77% for Venezuelans, from 6,182 trying to cross the border illegally to only 1,451, and 99% for Nicaraguans, from 35,361 people trying to cross the border to 402. During the same period, Border Patrol encounters with 3 Central American countries without access to the parole programs changed very little. Border Patrol encounters with Salvadorans along the southwest border rose by 6%. For Guatemalans, encounters declined by only 2%, from 14,000 to a little less, from 14,245 to 13,942. And from Hondurans, from 10,328 to only 9,952. It's amazing if you give a legal pathway to people. And part of this legal pathway is checking backgrounds and everything else. You end the crisis. By the way, in January 2023, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and other Republican attorneys generals filed a motion for preliminary injunction to stop the parole programs for Venezuela, to stop the parole programs for Cuba, for Ukraine, Haiti, Nicaragua, which, by the way, is obvious the most effective approach to reducing illegal entry into the United States since the Bracero program, which was a program that increased the lawful admissions for farm workers in the 1950s. So for 80 years, this is the first program that has proven to reduce illegal immigration by a snap of a finger. Now, these Republicans want to end it because immigration is all politics, because they don't want Biden to succeed, because if Biden succeeds, then Republicans will lose. They want Biden to not succeed. They want problems at the border. They don't want to come up with a solution to fix it. And they certainly don't want to put money into it or come up with a program, because then that just all rewards Biden. Now, for this injunction to work to stop the Venezuelan, Haitian, Ukrainian, Nicaraguan, Cuban parole program, the judge would need to override the president's authority to negotiate with a foreign country, since the parole program is part of an agreement with Mexico. Mexico has agreed to accept up to 30,000 migrants each month from the 4 countries who attempted to walk or swim across the United States-Mexico border and are turned back. Now, if these parole programs are stopped, Mexico is not going to accept people either, and then we're going to have a huge swelling of people back at the border. So on March 17th, a key Florida Senate panel approved a measure aimed at expanding Governor Ron DeSantis' crackdown on illegal immigration. And the Republican-dominated panel voted 15-5 along party lines to approve Florida's immigration bill. The measure, SB 1718, would beef up sanctions against businesses that hire undocumented immigrants, allow state law enforcement officials to conduct random audits of business compliance with the law, and increase criminal penalties for human smuggling. The proposal also would ban local governments from giving money to organizations to create identification cards for undocumented immigrants, and would establish that Florida will not recognize driver's license issued to undocumented immigrants in other states. The bill, sponsored by Spring Hill Republican Blase Ingoglia, also would require hospitals that receive Medicaid reimbursements to begin tracking how much money is spent on undocumented immigrants in emergency rooms. And it would repeal a 2014 state law allowing undocumented immigrants to practice law in Florida. Part of the proposal aimed at curbing human smuggling would make it a felony for people to transport, conceal, harbor, or shield from detection a person they know or reasonably should know has entered the United States in violation of law and has not been inspected by the federal government. So that would basically, anybody who rents a home to someone they know is undocumented, a lawyer like myself who a client retains to help them solve their immigration problem, knowingly helps somebody who's undocumented. I would be breaking the law if I was in Florida and this bill goes through. Now, opponents of the measure said the changes would put hundreds of thousands of Floridians, including landlords, like I said, lawyers, like I said, religious leaders, a pastor at a church helping somebody, all at risk of becoming criminals and going to jail. Critics also argued that the hospital data collection requirement in the bill could discourage undocumented immigrants from even seeking medical help. People would be dying on the street. Florida Governor DeSantis, who has not declared his candidacy but is considered a top contender for the Republican presidential nomination in 2024, has frequently clashed with President Biden's administration over immigration issues. And last month, the governor rolled out a sweeping immigration plan that mirrored Ingoglia's bill. Now, assuming this comes into law, assuming it does, there will be a lawsuit right away. There will be an injunction. And the lawsuit will be that the state of Florida would be in violation of the Interstate Commerce Clause of the Constitution because they can't prevent people with a driver's license from another state from driving in the state of Florida. And they would be in violation of the Constitution itself because the immigration laws is the realm of the federal government, not the state government. So for those two reasons, on its face, it would not be allowed, in my opinion. It's going to go through the courts anyway, so nobody in Florida needs to freak out right now. It's going to not go into effect. It's going to go through the courts, and my guess is it's illegal. But we'll see. But even if it's legal, this is years and years and years and years and years down the road before it actually goes into effect, by the time we're done with all these court cases, assuming it even becomes a law. On March 10th, the Republican leadership in Texas House announced that passing a bill to make illegal immigration a felony is top priority this spring. The Border Protection Unit Act, introduced by state Republican Representative Matt Schaefer and supported by key leaders of the majority Republican Texas House of Representatives, would create a specialized border protection police force and make illegal immigration a state felony. So if you're illegal, they would now call it a crime. Also, in violation of the U.S. Constitution. Both of those would end up being up in court and years and years and years in litigation before it actually goes into effect. Even though Florida and Texas is putting the hammer down on immigrants, here's something Republicans in Florida and Texas should pay attention to. The results of a new survey conducted in February by the National Immigration Forum with the Bullfinch Group reveal strong Republican and evangelical support for meaningful immigration reform and suggests that harsh anti-immigrant rhetoric does not resonate with most conservative voters. Gene Murray, president of the National Immigration Forum, said, "We found that there is incredible support among conservatives, Republicans, and evangelicals for immigration reforms that are humane and sensible." The poll found 79% of white evangelical Protestants favor measures to increase border security and provide pathways to citizenship for immigrants brought to the United States as children, and ensure a reliable workforce for the nation's farmers and ranchers. 79% of Republicans are in favor of this. White evangelical Republicans. Among all registered voters, 76% agreed that Democrats and Republicans in Congress should cooperate on boosting border security, helping dreamers become citizens, and providing a legal migrant workforce for farmers and ranchers. Strong majorities also said they would support the U.S. providing refuge for individuals and families fleeing serious persecution and torture, and would agree that welcoming newcomers to our communities is an American value. So a vast majority of people in America believe this. 79% of evangelicals who support versus 9% of evangelicals who are opposed to immigration reform, that's huge. She said the polling results present a rejection of the harsh anti-immigrant language that marked Donald Trump's presidency. The kind of anti-immigrant rhetoric that used to have so much power doesn't seem to hold water anymore. The survey was polled between 1,200 U.S. adults between February 17th and February 22nd. And this is not the only poll. Fox News reported on their poll on February 26th that 74% of voters want the United States to increase federal agents at the southern border, and 73% favor boosting the number of immigration judges to speed up asylum processes. They also favor, 73% of people favor making it easier to immigrate to the United States of America, which would presumably incentivize people to choose legal pathways to the United States. And slightly more voters favor allowing illegal immigrants with jobs in the United States to apply for legal status, 66%, and almost 2/3, then support deporting them back to their countries. This is the 125th anniversary of a court ruling that guaranteed birthright citizenship in the United States. In a 6-2 decision issued on March 28th, 1898, the United States Supreme Court held that Wong Kim Ark had acquired United States citizenship at birth, and that the American citizenship, which Wong Kim Ark acquired by birth within the United States, has not been lost and has not been taken away by anything that can happen after his birth. Born in San Francisco in 1873, Wong Kim Ark was denied re-entry into the United States at age 21 after visiting family abroad. And this was under a recently enacted Chinese Exclusion Act. Basically, it didn't allow Chinese people into the United States. With legal assistance from the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, Wong Kim Ark sued the federal government. In 1898, the Supreme Court recognized that birthright citizenship is guaranteed under the 14th Amendment. And once you're a U.S. citizen and born in the United States, it never goes away. You can never take it away. The 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868. It opens with a citizenship clause. It reads, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state where they reside. The Supreme Court addressed the meaning of this provision in the case, ruling that because Wong Kim Ark was born in the United States and his parents were not employed in any diplomatic or official capacity, the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment automatically makes him a U.S. citizen. Ming Shu Chen, law professor and director of the Center for Race, Immigration, Citizenship, and Equity at University of California Law Schools in San Francisco, said, the legacy of Wong Kim Ark is a bulwark in the continuing struggle to define who gets to be an American. It stands for the proposition that children born in the United States are American, notwithstanding if their parents are Black, if their parents are Asian, if their parents are Latinx. You were born in the United States, you're an American. Period. On March 23rd, University of Michigan law professor Sam Ehrman spoke about the Wong Kim Ark and birthright citizenship at the University of California Law School in San Francisco, and the white supremacist origins of the United States legal arguments that citizenship should be based on one's parents rather than one's birthplace. Ehrman said, we today live in an age where birthright citizenship is again under attack, because up until that day in 1898, many people were denied citizenship who were born in the United States of America because of who their parents were. And that ended 125 years ago. John Trevina, former dean of the University of San Francisco School of Law, said Wong Kim Ark is a reminder that the Chinese-American leadership on civil rights dates back to the 1880s. Victor Q, treasurer of the Asian Pacific American Law Student Association at University of California Law School in San Francisco, said, the story of children of immigrants fighting for their legal recognition is part of the broader American story. Thanks for watching. For more Bradshaw Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.